in a series for the past week now. Last week we started a series called Unshakable. And this series is walking us through the book of Daniel. And we've been talking about the importance of living a life of faithfulness and integrity. Last week we talked about not living with compromise, right? We talked about how Daniel decided, I will not compromise. I will live for God. I will not compromise. He and his friends decided that. And that's what you and I need to decide. Are we going to live without compromise? And I know many of you came to the front and you made that commitment and said, yes, I'm going to live for God and I will not compromise. How many of you got tested this week? I told you, it's going to come. You're going to be tested. But today I want to focus on a different aspect of this, and that is, I want to talk about faithfulness. Faithfulness. Faithfulness is when you're loyal, when you're true to your word, when you're rock solidly dependable. People who are faithful never go back on a promise. They never betray those they are loyal to. No matter how difficult the circumstances may be, they can be counted on. Now, I don't know about you, but I want to be faithful. Right? I want to be one of those people that other people can count on and say, I know who he is. I know what he stands for. And I know that no matter what happens, he will not bend. He will not be shaken. He's rock solid. I want to be that person. In fact, I would say this if I asked you, I think all of us want to be that, right? Wouldn't you agree? I think we all want to be that kind of person. But what we're seeing in our world today is something quite different. Wouldn't you agree? When the pressure's on, we're not always who we're supposed to be. I don't know about you, but I realize that being faithful is hard. I mean, I read stories in the Bible, stories like David when he faced the giant, stories of Moses when he faced Pharaoh, stories in the Bible of like Job when he faced an illness and pain and suffering like none of us have ever encountered. And yet, they were faithful. They didn't turn their back on God. They didn't stop believing. They were rock solidly dependable. And I read that and I go, man, would I be like they were? Would I have stood up to that giant like David did? Or would I have been like every other Israelite soldier hiding behind the rocks? If I had to endure what Job had to endure, all of that pain and suffering and illness, the loss of his family, if I had to endure that, would I still trust God? Would I still be faithful? I read those stories and I question, how did they do it? How do they do it? Would I be as faithful as they were? Is my faith as unshakable as theirs was? How about you? How is your faith? Is it unshakable? If you were to face ridicule from family or friends for believing in God, would you deny knowing Him? We don't have to deal with that as much in America as some other people do in other nations. But it's starting to get that way. It's starting to become, our culture is starting to become anti-Christian. if you faced an illness or even death, would you grow bitter and turn your back on God? Or would you trust Him? If everything you value was taken away from you, you lost your home, you lost your job, you lost everything, would you still trust Him? Would you still follow Him? You see, this is what being faithful is all about. That no matter what the pressures are, no matter what the circumstances are, you are who you are. You are faithful. How can we have that unshakable faith? What does it take? Well, there are 3 young men in the Bible, and they're my heroes. I think I love these guys more than anybody else in the Bible. I look up to them. They're 3 young men. They're Daniel's friends. We talked about them last week. They're Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And they can teach us something about having an unshakable faith. Because that's exactly what they had. They faced a situation where they had to make a choice. And it's a situation that I gotta be honest with you, I think all of us would have been tested. Let me give you some background of the story that we're about to read. These were 3 of Daniel's friends. They came from Israel. Last week, remember we talked about this? The Israelites, they turned their back on God, right? And so God said, okay, you're going to turn your back on me, then I'm going to allow the nation of Babylon to come in, overpower you, and take some of you captive, right? And the reason God did that was like, okay, I'm going to let this happen to you until you finally get it that I am your God. And you need to serve me. So this happened. And so the Babylonians came in and they took some of these Israelites captive and brought them back. And the king actually took some of the royal family, okay, of Israel. And the young men of the royal family, and he brought them in to his palace, and he began to indoctrinate them. And basically what he was trying to do is he's trying to strip them of their beliefs, of their God, and all of their culture as Israelites, and he was trying to turn them into Babylonians. Right? That's what his plan was. And so Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and Daniel actually, they decided, as we learned last week, they decided, no, we're not going to become Babylonians. We are going to be Israelites. We are going to be people of God, men of God. We're going to serve God no matter what happens to us. And so they did, and they lived that out. And here's what happened. And we saw this last week. God began to bless them. God began to show them favor, and they began to have tremendous skills and ability. So much so that it impressed the king. He was like, man, these guys, they know what they're talking about. Their wisdom surpasses anyone else on my staff. And so whenever he had problems, he's like, hey, I don't want to hear from any of you guys. Go get me Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. I want to hear what they have to say. So they had tremendous influence with the king. And the king put them in high positions in the government of Babylon. And one day, the king decides to make a statue. And it's a huge statue. And it's a gold statue. Many believe it was a statue of himself. And he commands all of his staff and all of these priests and everybody that serves him is supposed to come in. And what he says is, I'm gonna ring some bells. I'm gonna blow some horns. And when you hear that, I want everybody to get on your face and bow down to my statue. And if you don't, there's consequences. I've got this fiery furnace. Okay? And I'm going to throw you inside. Basically, so he called them together. He said, here's what I'm going to do. He called them together, and he blew the trumpets. He rang the bell, and everybody bowed to this gold statue, except Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Listen to this. Daniel chapter 3, verse 12 through 18. This is what it says. I'm reading from the New Living Translation. You can turn there in your Bibles. Daniel chapter 3, verses 12 through 18. Verse 12 starts in verse 12, and this is what it says. But there are some Jews. Oh, and basically, I'm sorry. Let me backtrack. I forgot. I'm starting a little bit in the middle of the story. Basically, so Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they don't bow, right? So they're still standing. Everybody else is bowing around them, and they're like this. Yep, not going to do it. And basically, these other priests and staff people, they see this, right? Because they notice, they're bowing and they're going, what the heck? What are you guys doing? And they see that they're not bowing. So what do? They go tattle on them. They go tell the king. And this is what happens in verse 12. But there are some Jews, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, whom you have put in charge of the province of Babylon. They pay no attention to you, your majesty. They refuse to serve your gods and do not worship the gold statue you have set up. Many believe that this whole thing, basically these guys, they convinced the king to build this statue and have everybody bow down to it simply because they were jealous of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and Daniel. And they knew that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and Daniel, that their religion would not allow them to bow down to a false god. Right? Because the God of the Bible says, no, I am the one true God. You serve no one but me. There are no other gods but me. And so Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they determined, we serve God. We're not compromising. No matter what happens. They made that decision. Remember, we talked about that last week. They made that decision. And so these governors, these satraps, these guys on the staff, they said, you know what? I'm tired of these guys getting all the glory. The king keeps listening to them and not me. I want some of that. So let's set a trap. Let's show the king who they really are. Continuing on into verse 13, it says this. This is the king's response. Then Nebuchadnezzar flew into a rage and ordered that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be brought before him. When they were brought in, Nebuchadnezzar said to them, is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you refuse to serve my gods or to worship the gold statue that I've set up? The king was trying to intimidate them. Think about this for a moment. They're standing in front of the king. This guy holds the power of life and death over them. And he says, listen, I'm getting some words that you're not doing what I said to do. Is that true? And it says he flew into rage. So he's probably like throwing things, right? He's foaming at the mouth, right? Have you ever been there? Maybe your boss or somebody who's just flipping out and you're just like, oh my gosh, I'm about to lose my job, right? I mean, that's what's going on. Only these guys are facing death. Okay? And here's the thing. All they had to do was lie and say, no, King, no, come on, we love you. We love your gods. It's all good. I didn't hear that bell. Sorry. I missed it. I was daydreaming. No, come on. You know we love you. Come on. Right? That's all they had to do. And wouldn't that have been so easy? It's one thing to not bow down and hope that nobody notices, right? You know, you're just kind of standing there and just kind of go, okay, shut up, nobody say nothing, we're just... But it's another thing to stand in front of the king and his mouth, he's foaming at the mouth, he's freaking out, and he's about ready to throw you into a fiery furnace. You can feel the heat from here, you know what I'm saying? And it's like, oh my gosh, this is real. And if I don't do something, my life is over. This is the pressure that they were under. They were facing death. And listen to this. The king goes on. This is what he says in verse 15. I will give you one more chance to bow down and worship the statue I've made when you hear the sound of the musical instruments. But if you refuse, you will be thrown immediately into the blazing furnace. And then what God will be able to rescue you from my power? There was tremendous pressure to compromise. I'm sure at this moment, the enemy, the devil, was whispering in their ears.
Amen.
He was whispering something like this. Hey, listen, you know that this image is really nothing? It's just a statue. Just go ahead and bow down. Bow down with your body, but inside you're standing, right? You're good. You haven't really compromised, because you know what that is. That's just a statue. But you just go ahead and bow down with your body, but you stand on the inside. You know what I'm talking about, because he does the same thing with you and I, right? You can give them what they want without changing what you believe. You can give them what they want without changing what you believe. How many of us have faced those times of compromise in our workplace or in any other place, and we've thought about the same thing? You know what? I'll just go with the flow. I'll just go with the flow because, hey, you know what? I know what I believe. God knows what I believe. I'm just in this situation right now, and I'm just going to kind of just move on. I once had a situation with myself. I was on a college campus, a junior college. And it was a sociology class. And during the course of this class, it became very, very clear. The subject of abortion came up many, many times. And it became very clear that the majority, at least the majority of the class, was pro-abortion, pro-choice. So much so that there was one gentleman that bragged about the fact that he has thrown many pro-life individuals through windows who were picketing outside of an abortion clinic. Now, I got to be honest with you, I'm not a fan of those people that picket outside of abortion clinics. I don't think that's how we need to approach things. I think we need to love people. I think we need to not just stand in front of them and yell and scream. Okay? So I don't totally feel bad for those guys that got thrown through a plate glass window. But my point is this. He was just like anti-pro-life people, right? And he was a big guy. And so through the course of I think it was probably a month or two into this class, again, this is a topic has come up over and over again. And I'm pro-life, right? I've never had, if you know, I've told you this before, I'm a shy individual. I'm a wallflower, right? I know it's weird, me being up here, I'm talking to all of you, but that's God, okay? Normally, I'm quiet, man. I just kind of hang back, and I'm good. And that's what I was doing in class. I was just like, whatever, let them argue. I'm not going to say nothing, I'm not going to worry about it. Well, the teacher decides to ask a question. And I think he did it because there was nobody giving a different opinion. And he says, I just want to ask, is there anybody who is pro-life in this classroom? And I'm like, oh no. And I had a choice to make. Because if I didn't raise my hand, nobody would know where I stand. And I had a choice to make. And I knew, and I had a feeling that I was going to be the only one who raised his hand. And so sure enough, I raised my hand. And boy, all of a sudden, and this is what's so amazing, and you're going to see this too in the story. I raised my hand. And all of a sudden, that guy who throws pro-lifers through plate glass windows, and there was another guy behind me, and he was pretty, aggressive towards the whole concept. The guy who throws people through plate glass windows, he turns and he's ready to debate, right? He's asking me those questions. Well, when does life begin, and all this stuff. And I haven't had a scholar. I haven't figured everything out about this subject, And so I'm just thinking, oh my gosh, I've got to defend this position. I wasn't prepared. I didn't get a whole, thing together, a paper on this. I don't know. I'm like, God, I'm quickly praying, God, help me right now. God, give me wisdom. Help me to answer these questions. Because I'm the only one here that's representing pro-life. And I might just get beat up, okay? And you know what happened? Is this guy starts, he starts coming at me. And I'm getting ready to defend, to say something, to try to answer his questions. And all of a sudden, this guy who's been pretty aggressive towards, or towards the idea of pro-life, and he's just been championing pro-choice. All of a sudden, he starts fighting with the guy. He's like, those questions aren't fair. You know what? He starts answering the questions for me. I didn't even have to say anything. This guy was doing all the work. I'm like, praise God. My enemies are fighting for me. Okay? But here's the thing. And I didn't get beat up afterwards, thank the Lord. But I had a choice to make. Do I raise my hand? Now here's the thing. I could have just sat in my desk and just went, I didn't hear the question, I don't know, whatever. You guys just do what you want. But if I didn't raise my hand, then I would have been counted as one of them that believed something that wasn't right. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego faced a similar situation. Much worse situation than I did. They could have bowed. There was so much pressure for them just to bow. Come on, what's the big deal? It's a little statue. Not little, but it's nothing. It's made of gold. Just bow already. Give in. Go with the flow. And here's the thing. All of us face those same situations. And you know what I'm talking about. You face those same situations, whether it's in your workplace, in your neighborhood, in your family, and you have to make a choice. Amen. Do I stand or do I bow? The enemy's going to try to convince you. He's going to try to convince you that there's really no option here. You don't know how many times I have people come to me and they justify their compromise. They justify it because there just wasn't any other option, Pastor. There really wasn't a choice. I had to do it or else. Right? Or else. But I love what Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego did. And listen to this. Listen to their response. I love this. This is why they're my heroes. And it says this in verse 16. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied, O Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God whom we serve is able to save us. He will rescue us from your power, your majesty. I love that. They're like, listen, king. We love you, we respect you, but you know what? We don't have to defend ourselves. Our God is bigger. Our God is bigger. Their actions were not the product of convenience or comfort. They were the product of conviction. They were men of made-up minds. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego knew what they believed, and they believed what they knew. They knew who God is and what He can do. They were motivated by faith. They served a God who was able to do exceedingly abundantly above all that they could ever ask for or think of. So when the enemy is whispering in their head and saying, there is really no other choice, you need to compromise, you need to go with the flow, you need to bow, they were like, no, there is always a choice because God is bigger than anything I might face. Amen. There was no question in their minds of whether God was real or if He had the power to rescue them. For them, it was a question they had already decided years ago. If you believe in God and believe in His power, then don't let any person or circumstances change or alter that belief. Your circumstances shouldn't determine your beliefs. Your beliefs should determine your response to your circumstances. If you face a terminal illness, you don't give up on God and walk away. You turn to God in faith, believing that He can cure you. He can rescue you.
Amen.
God is bigger. Doesn't matter what the doctor said. God is bigger. It doesn't matter what's going to happen at work if you don't do what the boss says. If the boss wants you to lie for him, it doesn't matter whether your job is on the line. You say, no, my God is bigger. And I will not bow. To have an unshakable faith means we have to make up our minds about God before we face the trials. You got to determine, are you going to serve God or not? You see, that's Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They already determined that. They determined that a long time ago. That we will serve God without compromise, no matter what happens. And then they were tested. And when the pressure was on, they were faithful. You know, if you're not a believer in this room, I know this message may not apply to you, but I just want to encourage you. You're listening to what the believers, how they should live. And you know what this is all about, right? You know what I'm talking about when I'm talking about this, because how many times in the world do we hear about the church is a bunch of hypocrites, right? It's out there. And there's some truth to that. There are times when we are hypocrites. We don't live like we're supposed to live. Well, now you're learning this is how we're supposed to live. This is who we're supposed to be. And you need to hold us accountable. Hold us accountable. Because this is who we should be. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they made up their minds about God, and because of their deep certainty about God, they were willing to risk their life for Him. Listen to this. I love this. So they just said, hey, listen, King, we don't need to defend ourselves. We know our God is bigger. We know He can rescue us. He can totally deliver us from your hand. We have no idea how He's going to do it, but we know He can. Right? Because they didn't know. But here's the thing. This is what I love this part. And this is powerful. Listen to this. In verse 18 it says this. But even if He doesn't, we want to make it clear to you, Your Majesty, that we will never serve your gods or worship the gold statue you have set up. I love that. You know what that says? It says, listen, I serve God no matter what. Even if it doesn't go my way, even if I do get beat up after class because I raised my hand, even if I do lose my job, even if I do end up with terminal cancer or terminal illness, I will not bow.
Amen. Hallelujah.
Because of their belief, they were committed. They were all in. They did not choose death, but they didn't run from it either. No matter what happened, they were not giving up or giving in. Even if God didn't give them the outcome they wanted or expected. How often do we blackmail God? I'll serve you if you do this for me, God. If you don't cure me, then I won't believe in you anymore. By declaring he is able, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego honored the power of God. They knew God had the power to save them. They had tremendous faith in God's power. But by saying, but if not, they gave place to God's sovereignty, his rule over their life. And they trusted that rule. They trusted God's judgment. Our commitment to God should not be conditional. God, I'll serve you as long as you do what I want. As long as my life is blessed. As long as things go according to my plan. To have an unshakable faith means being certain about what we believe and committed to living that out no matter what. Is that you? Are you committed to living for God no matter what? Are you committed that no matter what happens, if God doesn't heal you, if he doesn't cure you, if he doesn't provide what you want him to provide, will you still serve him? Are you faithful? We should not expect our faith to guarantee us safety from suffering or guarantee our comfort. We should expect our faith to prevent us from caving in under the pressure to give up on the convictions that we know to be true. We need to be able to say, I will serve you even if you don't cure me. Even if I lose my job, I serve you. What's amazing is, I love Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. I love their commitment. I love their faithfulness. They said, listen, King, we know God can save us. But even if he doesn't, we will not bow to your gods or your statue. And you know what happened? The king ordered them, his guards, to turn up the heat on the furnace. So not only was it's already going to be hot, right? He says, crank it up, boys. We're going to have some barbecue, right? And he grabs them, or he has the guards grab Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and he throws them into the furnace. Throws them into the furnace. Now, can you just imagine what's going through Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego's mind? I mean, they probably were like hoping that God would save them like now, before the furnace, right? You know, strike the king dead, I don't know, whatever, right? Angels show up, escort them out. I mean, anything. You can imagine that all of a sudden, when those guards grab their arms and start dragging them towards the furnace, it got real, right? It got real. But they still were faithful. They still remain faithful. And in fact, you'll read in the story, and you can read this on your own. They get thrown into the furnace. And the king, he kind of has a peephole, right? And he's looking at these guys. He's expecting them to be bursting into flames, screaming and yelling. And instead, they're walking around as if nothing's wrong.
Amen. Amen. Glory to God.
And then he sees that there are not only 3 men, but there's 4 men in there. And one of them looks like the Son of God. And they're walking around as if nothing's wrong. And all of a sudden, he gets convicted. And he realizes, wait a second, I was wrong. Their God can rescue them. And he says to them, and I love this, he starts calling them and says, hey guys, come out! Come out! You kind of get this humble tone to his voice now. It's like, hey guys, come on out! I want to talk to you. And he's like, no other God can save like this.
Amen.
No other God. And he declares that he makes a decree. He says, listen, if anybody ever says anything about the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, I will have them torn to pieces.
Amen.
You see, they were men who were faithful. And they had determined to serve God, to live for God no matter what happened. They were going to be faithful. And you know what? God saw them through. God carried them through the furnace. The question is for us, are we going to be those kind of people? Are we going to be faithful? Because we're going to go through those times. We're going to face those situations where it's just going to be so much easier to bow. It's just so much easier to just go with the flow, go with the crowd. We're going to go through those times when it just feels like compromise is just the only option. If I don't take money out of petty cash at work, if I don't steal that money, I'm not going to have my rent this month. It's the only option. I've got to do it. Or are we going to be the kind of people that says no? Even if I lose my house, even if I lose my job, even if I lose everything, I serve God. And I will not compromise. I will not bow. Would you bow your heads and close your eyes with me?